XIVIX University is an educational organization mainly focused on science, engineering, art, and business. Our organization was founded by Mr. Anjana Suravira, who happens to be a visionary young entrepreneur from University of Colombo. This video tutorial series is dedicated for academic research, and I'm your host, Yorchana Divyanjana, and I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know on how to conduct a research and academic research to be more specific. The series has been split into 4 different tutorials, and as the first video tutorial of the series, I'm going to walk you through the research fundamentals and the planning process. As you can probably see in the table of content, right after the research fundamentals and planning, I'm going to walk you through literature review and research design, and after that the data collection and analysis process, as well as the writing and publishing, which happens to be the 4th and the end tutorial of this series. I'm pretty confident that you have heard this word research before in your life. So have you ever asked this question to yourself, what exactly is a research? Alright, let me explain. According to the Oxford Dictionary, research can be interpreted as a systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Alright, let's elaborate this idea a little bit more. So research is a systematic, which means it follows a sequential process, and this process is related to an investigation, right? So you can think of some kind of a topic or problem, a question that pops into your mind, and you're going to discover new information about this specific topic, and you're going to interpret existing facts regarding this matter or the topic, and you're going to increase the understanding of this subject or the identified topic or the problem. So basic idea is that you identify a topic or a specific problem, and you're going to discover more about this topic. You dive deep and you discover much more information about it than you used to know, and you're going to increase the amount of understanding that you possess, and that is the entry point for research. Information and facts discovery is not good enough, so we're going to take a step ahead and we're going to gather data or the evidences, right? And you're going to analyze those data because there are patterns that we can learn from, because it offers you a solid foundation regarding the problem or the topic you have identified. And right after the data analysis phase, where you found hidden patterns which make an impact on the identified topic, you can draw conclusions by comparing those analyzed data, and finally draw conclusions that contribute to the knowledge in the field. So research is not just a casual search like you might just Google something, because it logically follows a structured method to ensure the findings are reliable and meaningful. They can make an impact on the world or a specific disciplinary field. Alright, let's repeat the building blocks of the research once more. First, you identify a topic or problem, something you're really curious about. And after that, you search for the available information, right? And interpret these existing facts. And you increase the amount of knowledge. And that leads you to gather more data. And right after that, you analyze those data. And based on your data analysis, you draw conclusions. So that is the fundamental and logical flow of how a research actually works. As you can see here, the importance of research, it expands the existing knowledge and helps discover new facts, and supports evidence-based decision making and solve real-world problems in science, technology, health, business, and society. It also improves the accuracy and the reliability of information. Also helps test theories, assumptions, and hypotheses, and drives innovation and technology advancements, informs policymaking and planning, and also enhances academic and professional credibility and encourages critical thinking and analytical skills. Also, it contributes to the social, economic, and cultural development. We have used 3 criteria: approach, purpose, and nature to help you understand the types of research. An approach is the most common one, where we categorize research into qualitative research, quantitative research, mixed methods. So a qualitative research focuses on understanding meanings, experiences, and perspectives of individuals or groups, and it basically deals with the non-numerical data. For instance, words, observations, images, texts, audios, and etc. As the most common methods, we can use interviews, focus groups, and observations, and case studies. Don't worry, you will be learning all of these methods and conduct your own qualitative research if you prefer it that way. And here we have an example on qualitative research, exploring how students feel about online learning experiences. And next we have quantitative research. So quantitative research is basically the complete opposite of the qualitative research. So it measures and analyzes numerical data, right? The complete opposite, like I said before. And test hypotheses and identify patterns and relationships between variables. And as the common methods that we can use when we conduct a quantitative research, we can use surveys, online surveys like Google Forms, and experiments and questionnaires and statistical analysis. As an example, here we have measuring the relationship between study hours and exam performance. So those are 2 variables: study hours and the exam performance. And next up we have mixed methods research. So mixed methods, which means it basically, the idea is to combine both qualitative and quantitative approaches within a single study. Researchers more often use this mixed method because it allows you to gather the qualitative and quantitative aspect of the subject. And here we have a better example, using surveys to measure customer satisfaction as a quantitative approach, and the interviews to understand why and what influences their opinion. Now you should be asking yourself when to use each approach. Alright, let's explore. So, qualitative research is best when your goal is to explore ideas, perceptions, and experiences in depth, right? So, quantitative is suitable when your aim is to measure variables, test theories, or generalize results. And mixed methods research is ideal when you need to explore both statistical and contextual understanding of a subject. Alright, another type of research is based on its purpose. Here we have basic research, which is the fundamental research, and the applied research, and the action research. The aim of a basic research is to expand existing knowledge and understanding of fundamental concepts without focusing on immediate practical application. So the better example we have here is studying how human memory functions to understand cognitive processes. So this is a low-level abstraction, and it is very scientific and innovative. An applied research is conducted to address specific practical problems faced by individuals, organizations, or society. So it basically uses theories, methods, and findings from basic research to develop solutions and help come up with the resolutions and improve processes and create new products or services. So the better example we have here is about developing a more efficient water purification system to provide safe drinking water. So this type of research is related to real-world implementations. If you remember this day, back in 2006, January 10th, on this day something revolutionary had happened. And yes, it's Steve Jobs. Do you remember the moment where he walked on a stage with an envelope and a couple of minutes later he took out what was inside this envelope? And yes, it was the first MacBook that the Apple unveiled, and it was revolutionary because it was very thin, even thinner than its predecessor, the iBook. And on top of all of this was a revolutionary moment in tech industry. So this is an outcome of an applied research. So they have conducted thousands of research efforts to achieve this level of precision along with user-centered compact design. And up next we have action research. So an action research basically focuses on improving current practices while simultaneously studying them. So in other words, this happens to be a cycle, and it involves planning, acting, observing, and reflecting. So as an example, a teacher testing new teaching methods to improve student engagement and learning the outcomes in a classroom. And the next type is research based on its nature. So based on its nature, we have divided a research into 5 types. The first one is exploratory research, and the second one is descriptive research, and third one is explanatory research, and the fourth one experimental research, and the last one is correlation research. So exploratory, as its name implies, this is all about exploration. So it is conducted when a research problem or topic is new, unclear, or there is not sufficient amount of data or information. As an example, exploring the potential impacts of artificial intelligence in education to identify opportunities, challenges, and areas for future research. Descriptive research aims to systematically describe characteristics, behaviors, or conditions of a population's phenomenon or situation that exist in the real world. And it basically focuses on answering questions such as what, who, when, and where. For an example, describing smartphone usage patterns among teenagers, including frequency of use, preferred applications, and usage durations. And the third one is explanatory research. As its name implies, this type of research is based on explaining the cause and effect relationship between variables. So this type of research helps you explain about the underlying mechanisms of a situation or subject. As an example, examining how different teaching methods affect student and academic performance. And the fourth one is the experimental research. So this type of research involves the deliberate manipulation of one or more independent variables while controlling other factors to observe their effect on the dependent variable. So usually this type of research is conducted in controlled environments and follows some strict procedures. As an example, testing effectiveness of a new drug in a controlled clinical trial by comparing the outcomes between the treatment and the control group. As the last one, correlation research. So correlation research examines the relationship or association between two or more variables without manipulating them, right? So it is the complete opposite of what an experimental research involves in. For an example, studying the relationship between physical activity levels and stress levels among adults. Alright, now we have the process of a research. So there are 8 steps that we're going to talk about. And the step 1 is identifying research problems and opportunities. The step 2 is reviewing existing literature. It's pretty much like the existing facts and informations and data. And the step 3 is formulating research questions and hypotheses. And step 4 is about designing the research methodology. And step 5 is about collecting data. And step 6 is all about analyzing and interpreting data. And step 7 is for writing and publishing the results. And step 8 is disseminating the findings. So feel free to download the learning material PDF from our official website. There is a complete guide on how this sequential process works, along with a practical example. So we have come to the chapter 2, formulating research questions, hypotheses, and objectives. So let's talk about what exactly are research questions. So formulating the research question is a critical step in the research process because it defines the entire focus and the direction of a study. So a well-formulated research question ensures that the investigation is clear, feasible, and significant. When formulating your own research questions, you can use these 2 steps. So the first one is to identify the research problems. Here are some examples. The problems can arise from personal experiences, literature gaps, societal needs, technological advances. And the second one is the techniques for identifying the problems. You can basically use a SWOT analysis and assessment about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the problem trees. So these are basically used to break down the complex problems into cause and effects, like the manageable chunks. And the stakeholder analysis, where you can use to identify who is affected and what their needs are. And another step out of this sequence is characteristics of a good research problems. So these were important because you need to know what is going to be in your problem, right? So there are a couple of characteristics. So first, it must be researchable, right? It can be researched systematically. Another one is significance or the significant. It addresses an important question or a gap where a research is much appreciated or much needed. And feasibility. So feasible means it has to be practical enough to test, right, in terms of time, resources, and the expertise. And also it has to be ethical, which means the researcher must be able to study without violating morals or legal standards. So using those steps, you can identify your problems. Once you successfully identify your problem, you can now proceed on to the next step, which is developing the research questions. In the development of a good research question, you have to consider a couple of characteristics. So it has to be clear and focused and researchable and relevant. So it is good to have a standard framework when developing these research questions. So as the first framework, I'm going to walk you through PICO, population, intervention, comparison, outcome. Or you can pronounce this as PICO framework. So this framework is widely used in healthcare research for structuring clinical research questions in a more clear and focused way. The most important part of this PICO framework is that each element of PICO ensures that the research question identifies the population of interest, the intervention being studied, and a comparison and the desired outcome. Here we have an example in adults with hypertension. So it implies the population part, and does low sodium diet, the interventions that they make, compared to regular diet, the comparison part, reduce blood pressure, the outcome. So the question is structured like this. In adults with hypertension, does low sodium diet compared to a regular diet reduce blood pressure? So that's the research question. This question is precise, measurable, and directly informs the purpose of this research. Alright, now we have the PEO framework: population, exposure, and outcome. You can also pronounce this as PEO framework if you prefer it that way. And this PEO framework is primarily used in observational and epidemiological research to explore relationships between exposure factors and outcomes. In PEO framework, intervention is an exception. Therefore, it focuses more on the natural occurrences. For an example, we have among office workers, the population. Does prolonged screen time, the exposure part, increase the risk of eye strain? The outcome, what could happen as a result of being exposed to screen time. And now we have hypothesis development. So hypothesis development is a specific, testable prediction about the relationship between two or more variables. So hypotheses are central to this research as they guide the study design, data collection process, as well as analysis process. There are two types of hypotheses: null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis, and the directional versus non-directional hypothesis. The most common pair of hypotheses would be the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. A null hypothesis is all about it states that there is no effect or relationship between variables. For an example, a low sodium diet has no effect on the blood pressure of adults with hypertension. And when it comes to alternative hypothesis, that is the complete opposite, because the alternative hypothesis proposes that there is an effect or relationship between specific variables. For an example, we could say a low sodium diet reduces the blood pressure of adults with hypertension. And the next pair of hypotheses are directional and non-directional. So directional hypothesis means it specifies the expected direction of the relationship between variables. For an example, students who study for 2 hours daily will score higher on the math test than students who study less than 2 hours. So basically it tells you about the direction of how these variables behave and what could be the impact on the dependent variable. So non-directional hypothesis predicts a relationship exists but does not specify its direction. So for an example, there's difference in math test scores between students who study 2 hours daily and those who study less than 2 hours. So you can see that is the complete opposite of a directional hypothesis. So when writing testable hypothesis, you should consider the following characteristics: clear and concise nature, the testability, specificity, and to which extent they are measurable. For an example, in adults aged between 30 and 50 with hypertension, a low sodium diet for 8 weeks will significantly reduce systolic blood pressure compared to a normal diet. So as you can guess, this is a positive alternative hypothesis. Alright, now we have research objectives. So research objectives are the statements that clearly define what a study intends to achieve. So it acts as a roadmap guiding the research process from planning, data collection, analysis through reporting. In objectives, the most striking or the notable characteristic is their action-oriented nature. so they are focused on the goals of the study. It is important to identify the differences between aim, objectives, and research questions. So aim is basically a broad statement of the overall purpose of research. It defines the general direction and the ultimate goal of the study. So here we have an example to investigate the impact of online learning on student engagement in higher education. And the objectives are specific, actionable goals that breaks the aim into manageable parts. So those are the little chunks of the entire aim. So they outline what the researcher intends to accomplish through the study. For an example, to measure student participation levels in online classes, or to analyze student perception of online learning tools. And the research questions are specific questions the study seeks to answer. They guide the methodology and data collection process. So here we have an example. Does the use of interactive tools in online classes improve the student engagement? So that is the question. When constructing the objectives, you can use this criteria called SMART. As SMART criteria says, an objective has to be specific, which means it should clearly define what it's going to achieve, and it also have to be measurable. The progress can be quantified or assessed, and also achievable, which means the objective can be realistically achieved within a constraint of time, resources, and scope. And relevant, which means the objective has to be aligned with the aim and significant for the field of study. And last, the time bound. So time bound basically specify a time frame for this objective to be achieved. Here we have an example, and it says to measure the effect of weekly 30-minute interactive quizzes on student engagement in online biology courses over one semester. And also you need to know the difference between general objectives and specific objectives. So basically, general objectives based on broad statements that outline the overall goal of research. For example, to explore factors affecting customer satisfaction in e-commerce platforms. On the other hand, we have specific objectives. You can think of a specific objective as the deconstruction of a general objective into manageable pieces. Here we have an example related to e-commerce, and there is a deconstruction, and it goes like to examine the influence of website design on user satisfaction and to assess the impact of delivery speed on customer loyalty, to evaluate the role of customer service responsiveness in online purchase decisions. In order to reconstruct the original general objective, you can cluster these three objectives. And next we have choosing a research topic. A research topic is very important because it guides the direction of a study or the research problem you have identified. And also it helps focus the investigation and ensures the meaningfulness as well as the relevance of its results. There's a couple of techniques that we can use when it comes to the construction of a research topic. Through these techniques, we can generate creative and organized ideas. As the very first technique, we have brainstorming. So brainstorming is a creative technique used to generate a wide range of ideas on a particular problem or subject. Having voices around obviously encourages free thinking, and the free thinking leads to innovation. There are two methods in brainstorming. The first one is mind mapping. So it basically creates a visual diagram of ideas related to a topic and connect them into a main theme with subtopics, sub-objectives in order to generate research possibilities. And the second method in brainstorming is concept clustering. Concept clustering involves in grouping related concepts into one format And this unified format helps understand and identify patterns, overlaps in the areas that needs more exploration. When you're working on this part, then you're going to find gaps in the existing knowledge. So finding gaps is the most interesting part because it fuels your curiosity. This process involves in reviewing literature to identify areas that have not been fully explored, or most probably the questions that remain unanswered. Through this iterative process, you can ask yourself what has not been studied yet and add up factual insights into your research. As a standardized framework for the evaluation of the suitability of your research topic, you can use FINA criteria. FINA basically stands for feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. So the feasible part refers to the practicality of your research topic, like can it be done within the available time, resources, and the expertise. The interesting part refers to the engagement of both researcher and the study field. And the part novel refers to the contribution of your research topic in relation to its original knowledge and insights. And the ethical means avoiding harm and following proper ethical approvals. And the last one is relevant. So relevant refers to the addressing of important questions as well as practical problems. There we have an example, and that is regarding the exploration of social media's effects on teenagers' mental health, and it reviews the studies and finds a research gap on Instagram use and its impact on sleep and stress. And this is the flow of the FINA criteria. The broad area is the social media and mental health, and the narrowed topic is the effect of Instagram use on sleep quality and stress levels among high school students. And the researcher has used FINA criteria to ensure its quality and the effectiveness. And it successfully concluded that the topic is feasible because the study can be completed within one semester using available skills, surveys, and interviews. It is also interesting as it aligns with the student's academic and personal interest in mental health and technology. And the study is novel since limited research focuses specifically on Instagram's effects on sleep and stress. And it is also ethical because it follows proper guidelines including parental consent and confidentiality. Also, it is relevant because the findings of this research topic help educators, parents, and also the policymakers better understand the potential risk of social media use. Well, in chapter 3, we're gonna shift our focus to research ethics. So basically, the research ethics refers to the principles and the standards that guide the researchers to conduct studies responsibly, honestly, with the maximum integrity. An ethical design of research involves obtaining informed consent from participants, maintaining confidentiality and privacy, avoiding harm, and following legal and institutional regulations. There are a couple of key principles when it comes to the research ethics. First one is the respect for an individual or group of individuals. And this is just the part where you obtain the informed consent. The next one is beneficence, where you try to minimize harm and maximize benefits to the participants. The next one is non-maleficence, so it basically refers to the practices or the actions that you take in order to avoid causing physical, psychological, or social harm. The justice for ensuring fair selection and treatment of participants. The confidentiality and privacy, so it is there to protect participants' personal information and data. The integrity and the honesty. It basically involves in communicating the research findings truthfully without any fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism. The transparency is the disclosure of research purpose, methods, and potential conflicts of interest. The last one is the accountability. So accountability refers to the adherence of institutional, legal, and professional guidelines. In a research context, plagiarism and academic integrity plays a crucial role, and plagiarism is the act of using someone else's work, ideas, or the words without proper acknowledgement. So it is basically a serious breach or theft in another sense. There are several types of plagiarism. The very first one is the verbatim plagiarism. It is the act of copying text word for word without quotation marks or citations. And the next one is paraphrasing plagiarism. And it is the act of rewriting someone else's idea without proper attribution. And the third one is self-plagiarism. It is the act of reusing your own previously submitted work without disclosure. And the last one, mosaic plagiarism. It is all about mixing your own words with phrases from sources without proper acknowledgement. There are tools that help us detect plagiarism-related activities in your research works or assignments, such as the Grammarly, Authenticate, PlagScan, and Crossref. Some of these tools require subscription for premium features. And next up, we have data privacy and confidentiality. These are absolutely critical aspects of an ethical research design, because this is where you're going to have to set countermeasures in order to protect individuals' privacy. It would act as the respondents in your research context. GDPR, also known as the General Data Protection Regulation, is a privacy law from the European Union and that protects people's personal data. It basically gives user controls over their information, like access, correction, or the deletion, and it requires organizations to handle data securely and transparently. And the same thing applies when it comes to a research context. Modern research is also guided by these regulations and standards set for how personal data is collected, stored, and processed. A researcher is required to demonstrate his efforts and dedications toward data collection, data storage, and processing. As countermeasures to ensure data privacy and confidentiality, a researcher could use encryption for sensitive data in transit at rest to prevent unauthorized access, and access control restrict data to unauthorized personnel. And the anonymity of the data and de-identification, basically remove or mask personal identifiers in datasets, such as this is why you should not collect their sensitive data like the bank account numbers, their private addresses, passwords, etc. And the fourth one is secure storage. You can use encrypted or password protected hard drives just in case you use physical devices such as your personal computer. Also, you can use Google Drive or Apple iCloud as cloud-based secure data storages. The fifth one is regular backups. It is best to maintain an encrypted backup to prevent data loss just in case you experience some kind of an unexpected data breach or data loss, so you can continue your procedure without disruptions. The sixth one is data retention policies, so you have to define clear timelines for how long data will be stored and ensure timely secure destruction right after retention timeline comes to an end. You can also implement audit trails and monitoring just in case you want to have a list of logs such as who accessed the data and when they were accessed, just in case an unauthorized activity was flagged. Also, you can use VPNs as secure networks, and training and awareness to educate researchers and staff on data privacy, security policies, and best practices just in case you're working with the crew or team. The 10th one is compliance and regulations. And in this case, you have to follow the data protection laws such as GDPR and the local privacy regulations. Here in Sri Lanka, we have to adhere with PDPA, also known as Personal Data Protection Act. And next we have IRB, also known as Institutional Review Board. Also, it's sometimes in some countries, they also call this as Ethics Committee. IRB is an independent committee established to review, approve, and monitor research involving human participants. This committee is basically made up of researchers, ethicists, and other community representatives. They basically evaluate your research proposal for the soundness of the ethical standard you have set. So for major research effort, you're going to have to submit your research proposal for the approval from this committee. And if there are any improvements or the gaps that they have found, they will contact you, so you'll have to reevaluate your work and resubmit your work for the approval from the committee. This is an ethic review checklist, and I suggest you to have a deep look into the sections that it's made up of. And in the chapter 4, it is all about research planning. So research planning is a systematic process of organizing how a study will be conducted before data collection begins. So basically this process includes everything that we have gone through this far. An effective research planning helps researchers to anticipate challenges, manage time and resources efficiently, and focus on the better maintenance throughout the research process. As the fundamental elements in a research plan, you have to identify the research scope, methodology, timeline, and resource requirements. Time management is a crucial component in research planning. For an efficient management of time, you can use a Gantt chart. So Gantt chart is basically a visual timeline that shows research activities against a specific time schedule. So it basically lists down all the important milestones such as your literature review, data collection, analysis, and etc. with their start and end dates. This is a very helpful tool because you can prematurely identify the timeline for each task, so it prevents overlapping when you're working on your research efforts. So as a consequence, it makes it easy to meet deadlines and coordinate activities and ensure that the workflow is more streamlined. As you can see in the figure 9, this is the basic template that you can use to create your own Gantt chart. In the first column, you can see the milestone of your progress, such as topic selection and problem identification, literature review, research design and methodology, ethical approval, tool development such as your questionnaires, surveys, interview guides, and etc. And the next, the data collection, data analysis, writing results and discussion, final report writing, submission and presentation. Excluding the first column, you can see other columns are dedicated for the timeline. So this is the basic guide to create your own Gantt chart. You first start off by breaking down the research into key stages like your milestones, such as the proposal, literature review, data collection, analysis, writing, and etc. You can actually use the research flow that we learned in the previous chapter. I hope that you can memorize that 8-staged research workflow. You can basically use it in here as in your activity column in your Gantt chart, and it is best if you can divide each stage into more manageable tasks. That is mainly because it allows you to ensure a better organization of your main stages. And then you can allocate realistic and achievable timelines for each task so you can track the progress when you're working on your research efforts. As creative project management tools, you can use Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Project, or Google Sheets. All these software applications allow you to create Gantt charts, and the choice of the tool depends on your personal preference or your familiarity with the ecosystem. And we have also created a table that includes the best practices and the common mistakes when it comes to the creation of Gantt charts. So feel free to make use of this table when you're creating your own Gantt chart, because we hope that this will help you work around anytime. Alright, we have come to the end of our first video tutorial in the tutorial series for academic research. This video was dedicated for the research fundamentals and planning. In the chapter 1, you went through the research approaches and research purposes, research natures, as well as the research standardized research process. And in the chapter 2, you learn how to formulate your own research questions, hypotheses, and objectives. And in chapter 3, you'll learn about the research ethics that you should adhere when you design your research. And in the 4th chapter, you will learn how to plan your own research. In the next video tutorial, I'm going to be walking you through how to conduct your own literature review, how to manage your citations, as well as how to design your research. So we hope that you have learned something new in this tutorial, and subscribe to our XIVIX University channel and turn on the notification bell so you will get notified when we post our next video tutorial in this series.